Appendix: Influence Map of Planar Space. This planar space influence map is not necessarily 100% accurate. In fact, it is a gross simplification of the current reality. Imagine, if you will, that planar space is an ocean. Portals would then be small islands dotting it. These islands are of negligible area compared to the vast ocean. Now imagine the majority of those islands are uninhabited, but there are a few that aren't. One might say that a given interstellar power is an aggregation of these islands. As such, there are no clear boundary lines, as this map might lead you to believe. There have been attempts, however, to divide up planar space. In other words, treaties were signed at several points to recognize the sovereignty of respective member states over a circular area of a certain diameter centered around each portal leading to an inhabited star system. Yet the humankind empire of Ov lay ever outside the reach of the international community, and due to their indifference with regard to these agreements, the divvying of planar space by dint of treatise ultimately came to no effect. Instead, the boundary lines of planar space emerged organically as a consequence of nature. In order to fully grasp how and why, please humor the following explanation of the basic physics at play. There is a point of inaccessibility for ships navigating through planar space, but those ships' cruising ranges are actually much smaller even than that theoretical dead end, because it's calculated by assuming that the entirety of the absolute greatest amount of mass that can be contained in a single space-time bubble is converted into energy. Since ships in the real world exist to ferry things across space, people can hardly afford to allow cargo and passengers, or the ships themselves for that matter, to turn into energy. Owing to this cruising range problem, ships navigating planar space need to resupply often. This means any sector that doesn't connect to a star system capable of resupplying a ship can't be crossed. This merciless physical law, combined with each nation's will to persist, molded the influence boundaries of the present day. If an interstellar power must use the portals of other countries to maintain contact between its own star systems, an emergency could very well break up its virtual domain. To avoid such perils, it must set a path connecting all of its star systems using its own portals. Consequently, each power's area of influence can be seen as a collection of navigation routes. In addition, a ship's cruising range is swayed in no small part by the flow of space-time particles. Because dense currents of space-time particles gush out from the central sector of the Milky Way portal belts, if one navigates from the outer edges inward toward the core of the galaxy, they must sail against the stream, causing their trip to be slower and the distance traveled shorter. That current is the biggest obstacle to likening planar space to an ocean. Perhaps it would serve you better, in this one case, to instead imagine a mountain. In any case, I'd now like to draw your attention to the Elish monarchy in the 12th ring. You might assume that the ideal path to travel from the Hyde portal to the Elish portal involves crossing the center area. However, in order to do that, there needs to exist portals in the 10th or 11th rings connecting to resupply bases. Yet the area outside the 7th ring is as yet largely undeveloped, leaving traveling alongside the 12th ring while taking space-time particles from the side as the only option. You are not to climb the mountain. You are instead to adopt the contour lines that make up the mountain as your paths. Now I would like to inform you of the history of planar space to date in simple terms, and in terms of the characteristics of planar space. The first humans to set foot into planar space did so through the Sume portal, belonging to the present-day Hania Federation. The Sume portal lies in the first ring. Sumerians quickly caught on that while traveling from there to the outer reaches was easy, the reverse was quite the challenge. Moreover, the planar space navigation technology of the time made it so that traversing the area between the first and second rings was next to impossible. They decided thereupon to search for potential trading partners and places to settle along the first ring, and it didn't take long for their efforts to bear fruit. A portal to a human-inhabited star system was discovered in the 12th ring, which was to be a foothold for their explorations all the way out to the outer edges. Thus did Sumerian technology reach the rest of humanity. Meanwhile, since Sumerians actively developed and settled planets, they formed the first interstellar power in human history. Then, the Ov entered planar space through their 8 portals. By some strange vagary of fate, Not a single one of those 8 was to be found in the first ring. This was rather a blessing in the eyes of the Av, for if even just one portal into the Empire existed in the first ring, they would have brushed paths with advanced star systems during their early stages, and given the temperament of the kin of the stars, those encounters could not have all been peaceful in nature. The Empire might have been snuffed out before it could bloom into the powerhouse it currently is. Luckily, the Av plumbed planar space disconnected from advanced star systems, granting them the time necessary to build up the strength to rival their planar space precursors. I don't have the space to elaborate on the history from that point on. To keep things short, the vicissitudes of destiny saw the rise and fall of various interstellar powers, leading to the present situation as depicted by the political map. Do mind that in actuality, as I stated earlier, the boundary lines are not so distinct, and there are places where they are in fact exceedingly vague. There are portals that seep into the domains of neighboring nations like enclaves. Furthermore, there are no portals between rings, which makes securing routes through inter-ring areas non-viable. The reason that I present to you this map, so akin to the map of a land world, is because a more technically accurate map was deemed to be counterproductively confusing.